Get started. My name is Josh Eichmeyer, Mayor of Seward, and Jonathan is normally the one that puts these on, but he got summoned to the economic development equivalent of jury duty, where he has to proctor an exam that other economic developers have to take, and so you get the B team today, so sorry about that. But your speakers are the A team, and so I'll just real quick for those of you. I see lots of your faces. Being Mayor of Seward is wonderful for me. I enjoy these opportunities to showcase our community and brag about it a little bit. We survived the 4th of July again, so that's always a big plus. We probably had 50,000 or more people in town that day. The weather was perfect. It just seems to get bigger and bigger every year. The car show seems to take up more and more streets every year, and so that's great to see it continue to grow even after all these years. We've had a lot of great economic development success working with Jonathan and his group, and most recently the Project Move, which is the tolls dairy processing facility, was a big development for our community. You're talking probably around $180 million or so, and you're looking at quite a few jobs being created as a result of that. But more importantly, it's much needed within the milk producing industry. I think they said the last time a milk processing facility was built in Nebraska was like in 1961. And so it was long overdue. And what that allows then is not just for the Tolles family to have a market to be able to essentially process their own milk, but eventually ramp up to where they can process other milk in the state as well, and outside the state. And so that's exciting for us. We definitely want to be an ag-friendly community. We do a lot of our development projects are either directly or indirectly related to agriculture, and that's a big part of our community and our identity. And so with that, I'd like to introduce, we have with the State Chamber, we have Hunter, were you going to speak as well? And Todd Bingham, hope I pronounced that right. We had a whole discussion. I told him he should go to check days this weekend and see how many names he can pronounce. They're all in the back of the vests that they wear.
That won't help.
And I'll give you $1 for every name you pronounce.
Yeah, it won't help, right?
And so you have to worry about, there's the hidden, there's the silent letters, and there's the invisible letters. So good luck with that.
Yeah.
So with that, I'd like to introduce them, and they can take it from there. So welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Don't clap for him. Don't clap for me yet. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Asking the camera, is this a PG-rated YouTube video we're putting on?
Sure.
I'd like to know my audience before I start, but no. Todd Bingham, been at the Chamber now 2.5 months. I know everything now. I met with Jessica on like day 3, so I'm, again, condolences for your grandmother, but I feel like I should have met with Grandma maybe subsequent to that meeting.
She could have told you a lot more.
Straightened a few other things out right there or something, but maybe I'll just give you a little background on myself. Born and raised in Utah, lived out of the country for a couple of years, lived in Tennessee for a little bit. Been in the association business, kind of trade organization business for 31 years. I ran Associated General Contractors, so a construction trade association in Utah is where I got my start. And then worked for the Farm Bureau for a number of years. My dad ran the Farm Bureau in Utah for most of his career. So I grew up in the ag industry and then lobbied for them, both state and federal. Then I ran a mining association for a number of years. Utah's a big mining state. And in the last 13 years, I ran the Manufacturers Association. So we're talking about dairy processing and what Jessica does with Lincoln Premium. So spent my whole life in kind of the arena of policy, trade organizations, representing business organizations, similar to what the chambers do across the state and country. And my son came out here to play college golf, and I came to see Nebraska and thought, I think I really like Nebraska, so I've enjoyed it. I don't like it today. If y'all get a handle on this heat and humidity, that'd be great. Because this western boy is kind of melting, if you will. Everybody's talking about playing golf, and I'm like, yeah, I just want to sit in a pool somewhere. So everybody keeps telling me it's going to get worse. Worse than it is today.
Yeah.
It's going to get worse than it is today.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Yeah. I'm good. No. All right. Okay. I'm trusting my more mature gentleman over here who's kind of saying, you know what, it's not going to get that bad. But you were probably born with gills, right? Because you lived in this area. Which I don't have those gills, and I literally get out of the shower and can't figure out why I'm still wet. So anyway, yeah, everybody keeps saying you're getting used to it. I don't know that that's the case, but people ask why I left Utah. I just couldn't handle any more of the 5 national parks, the wonderful skiing in the mountains, and just thought I would come do something different. No, I grew up there, loved it. It was time in my career to kind of just determine what else I wanted to do, what was my next biggest challenge, and I get bored. And had spent 13 years in my most recent organization and kind of done what I wanted to do and growing that organization. I knew the former CEO of the Chamber, actually the 2 former CEOs of the Chamber are both good friends, worked with them through some national organizations related to manufacturing, and when the job came open, my son was actually the first one to call me and said, "Dad, you need to go to Nebraska." And here I am, and he's back in Utah now. So I'm trying to figure out how to get him back out here into Nebraska. So 30-year lobbyist, we'll see if I can get it done. I'm lobbying his girlfriend. Lobbying, right? If I can get that taken care of, it's a done deal. So I told him just move, she'll follow you, but we'll work on that. So excited to be here, excited to work with the Chamber. We have a great team. Hunter does an absolutely amazing job with us on policy work. I think that's one of the things we kind of wanted to visit with you a little bit today is about policy. I'll let him talk here in a second, but as lobbyists, we get paid by the word, so I've got to get in every word I can. There's a saying that says either get into politics or get out of business. It would be really interesting to kind of get some background. I broke my rule, which is to always know who's in the room before I speak. What your backgrounds are, what types of businesses you're involved in, and then as we get down the road a little bit today, we'd like to talk about how you think policy and politics impact not only your business but your daily life. Yeah. And then some dialogue and discussion around how that perhaps has changed. I can tell you how it's changed in my 31 years. Hunter, we were just in a meeting with a candidate running for legislature and talked a little bit about politics as a sport. And the political realm is very different than it was when I started in this business. A lot of West Coast offense. Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, I've often said that the way we've done things is kind of run a Big Ten offense here in Nebraska, and everybody knows what that is. It's kind of smash mouth football. You just very direct, very straightforward up the gut. We're running West Coast offense now in politics. It's very complicated. It's very strategic. It's the ball. Sometimes you're not even quite sure where the ball is. It's kind of like hockey, where you look and you're like, I can't find. Oh, there it is. So it's just changed. The money side of it has changed significantly. Growing up in a state like Utah that was super conservative, campaigns were relatively inexpensive. Back in the day, you wouldn't spend more than maybe 10 grand for a Senate campaign. Now you can't even start with less than 10K. Campaign fundraising was kind of a period of time that happened within a 60-day period, and now it is depending on when the legislature is in session. A 300-day a year fundraising campaign. So I'd be interested to visit about how this happened. Maybe just lastly, I am a second-generation lobbyist. There's a few of us around out there. We generally suffer from mental illness. because we saw everything that happened around us and still chose to go into that arena. My youngest son is kind of toying with the idea, and I'm literally trying to talk him out of it, because I just said the game has changed and it is different than what it used to be. Spent a lot of my career kind of defending what lobbyists do. Don't quote me on this, but it's getting harder and harder every day to defend what a lobbyist does. It certainly is still something very, very defensible in this state and in several states around us, but in the DC arena and in many of the states across the country, that phrase is not one that people enjoy. And so with that, I'll let Hunter kind of kick off and talk about some of our priorities and things we're working on, and then we want to open it up mostly kind of some dialogue and discussion and questions. Go from there.
Perfect. We'll do this at some point, so I think it'd be helpful for me before I start talking about chamber issues, what we care about politically, to know.
Why did you get back to walk-up music and I didn't get one?
Name, where you work, what you do. Just so I'm kind of aware of what types of businesses, what types of operations you all may be involved with, or what you do in your community. Real quick, go around the room, is that okay? Start with you. Sorry, you just took a bite.
Yeah.
I did that on purpose.
Yeah. Lauren Obermeyer, I'm actually with the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, but I live in Seward County, and so that's how I'm involved.
I recognized you, and I
Yep.
couldn't put the face in, but I was like, okay.
Yep.
Anita Ford, I'm an entrepreneur here in Seward, and I own a company that focuses on developing impactful leaders and effective communicators.
Wonderful.
Riley Wolfong, I'm an account executive over at Jones Group Insurance and Financial Services.
Patrick Kelly, I'm a part owner of a Levander body shop here in town. We have 17 across the state, some in Kansas, just jumping into South Dakota and Colorado. So you may have heard of our business a little bit. But I also serve as the mayor of Milford, just down the roadway, so kind of involved in a few different things and served on Jonathan's board for the last 8 years, so just kind of touch on a few things.
I'm Ben Grimmel. I work at Mead Lumber in Lincoln, do sales for them. I live here in Seward.
Carter Smith, work for Congressman Mike Flood's office, based out of Lincoln, but I handle field rep duties for Seward County.
Never heard of it.
I'm Rich Wergen. I'm a retired school teacher. I work at Crouch's Farm and Hardware, which is a new business in town. They've been open for 9 months, and they're finding their way. I'm also on the Seward City Council, Ward 3. I'm in my first term, so I've got a ways to go.
Jessica Coulterman, I helped start Lincoln Premium Poultry in Fremont and recruited farmers here in Seward County, also on the City Council.
Josh Eichmeyer, Mayor of Seward. I'm also the director of the small state agency that regulates the car industry.
Dave Franciscato, Nebraska Chamber, Seward City Council, Young Professionals.
Sharon Powell, Village Trustee, or Village of Utica Trustee, President. I sit on the League of Municipal Executive Board of Directors. I also have had the pleasure to sit on the 6 regions on the Nebraska board, and just really get to dive into how do we stop our brain, lead, and develop our young minds here.
Jim Swanson, Village of Utica Trustee.
Okay. Well, my name is Hunter Traynor. I handle the legislative, policy, political efforts for the State Chamber, statewide business organization representing businesses of all shapes and sizes in every corner of the state. The nature of business and the interplay between business and politics is changing very quickly. That is a change that is driven by a lot of forces, but as those who think about business or community development, economic growth on a day-to-day basis, either in your own job or as a citizen watching your community grow and your state grow, it's clear that the foundations politically are moving a little bit. There's generational trade uncertainty. There is the pendulum of executively derived regulations that swings back and forth in Washington every 4 years. We, of course, came off a tremendous period of transitory inflation after the pandemic. Supply chains are disrupted. I'm sure you think about supply chains in the lumber industry on a day-to-day basis. And borders are becoming more and more porous as it relates to business. Companies are highly tech-driven, they're more nimble than they've ever been before, and companies are more willing to move from state to state based on what that state can promise them, right? I know you work in professional services. Professional services is a highly tech-driven, mobile business. And so operations can bleed across state lines in ways that traditional hard industries that have powered Nebraska's economy, such as agriculture and manufacturing, can't. That's certainly changing with manufacturing. There was just a presidential election about a year ago, and one of the largest issues that dominated that presidential election and will continue to ripple through both state policy making and also local economic development decisions is the onshoring of manufacturing jobs, right? So even hard industries like that are thinking with more mobility about where they site their operations and where they grow. Mayor Eichmeyer talked about the new dairy facility. That's a huge win for a local community like Seward. It provides high-paying jobs, stable employment numbers. They give back to the community. And just as Seward was likely competing for that business to locate their operations, or for, in the example of, let's say, a manufacturing facility in town to expand their operations in Seward rather than doing it in Boise, Idaho, that's a really competitive game. And at the Chamber, we think a lot about big picture economic competitiveness. What does the state of Nebraska have to offer a company or companies who are here and communities that are filled with young people like yourselves that other states don't have, right? Because you take that environment and you combine it with the proliferation of technology, automation, shrinking workforces, and suddenly businesses, like I just said, are more willing to move depending on where they get a better deal, right? And I don't think that's that hard to conceptualize when you think about it from the perspective of an employer, right? An employer's got a real, kick-ass unicorn employee that they want to keep, and that employee comes to them and says, hey, I'm getting a pretty good deal down the street, I don't want to leave, I care about this place, I don't want to go elsewhere. Is there anything you can do for me? And at its core, that analogy is economic development at the statewide level, right? What does state government collect and how do they distribute it to keep the tide rising for communities around the state, knowing that a Seward is very different than a South Omaha, is very different than a Kearney, is very different than a Sidney. So that's the big ticket environment that we work on politically, day in, day out, and for years and years and years, that's been tax policy, right? The Chamber has historically fought all the tax fights down at the legislature, and there's still tax fights going on at the legislature. It's Groundhog's Day, okay? We've been fighting tax fights in Nebraska since the 60s. And we thought in 1967, when the state got rid of the property tax and went to a sales and income tax model, that those fights would stop. And they certainly haven't. So taxes are a big deal for businesses, but probably the biggest one, and what I want to transition the rest of this conversation into probably talking about is workforce. Businesses and then the states in which they operate are up against a really crazy math problem that is limiting the ability for companies of all shapes and sizes and across industries to grow. Why do you think there's so much damn money on Wall Street flowing into artificial intelligence right now? We don't have any people. Or we certainly have less people tomorrow than we did the day before. Just some statistics to paint this, drive this home. I think Nebraska's got the second or third highest birth rate of any state in the country. We compete with South Dakota and Utah.
Utah's now second, Idaho just passed it.
Idaho's catching up, so we're probably 3 or 4. Even being the highest, even being amongst the highest from a birth rate standpoint, we're still below as a state replacement rate, meaning that if you take out domestic in-migration and domestic out-migration, people who are born in the United States moving in or people who are born in Nebraska moving out, the state's shrinking. And From a business standpoint, that's a hard task. If you can't automate your operations to save money on labor costs and grow your revenue without that input of people and not having enough of them, that's a hard task. That's driving this push towards automation. But it's also hard from a public finance model. You have a non-linear or non-relational challenge where you still may need to provide the same firefighting services as you did the year before, even though your tax base has gotten smaller. And so I think the big challenge for the state of Nebraska and for local communities to play a part in is how do we position the state to actually grow as a bare fixture of population into the next 20, 30 years. Because if you look at demographic data, the states whose economies are growing pound for pound right now at the highest rates, they're adding people. And what's it take to add people in this day and age? What do young people, like many of you, care about? Cost of housing, cost of childcare, two big ones right off the gate, and wages. But wages with the added wrinkle of career advancement. So industries and companies that present opportunities for folks to build a career within that organization or within that industry rather than just a job. It's not to say that you just punch the clock and work for wages and hang out, like there's nothing wrong with that. But for folks that are leaving the state of Nebraska, coming out of the university or the community college system and taking off to move to Chicago or Austin, or Nashville, wherever all the folks are moving to these days, those are some of the variables that they're thinking about. And so when you take a workforce issue and you lay it next to a tax issue, you would really start to scratch your head about what's the link between tax policy in the state of Nebraska and workforce development. Well, it takes taxes to pay for workforce development at the state level, and the inability to invest in people at scale will make the tax problems harder to solve later on if your growth is going down. And so this got a little bit more in the weeds than I expected to. Todd was right. I do get paid by the word. But I guess what I really wanted to do today is sit back down and then go around the room, and to the extent people are willing, from your perspective, you clearly have an interest in maybe politics and policy. You have an interest in your local community and the success of Seward or Milford or Utica or whatever. And from your vantage point, because we can't do our job as a statewide business association if we don't know what businesses across the state are saying, what are you worried about? What opportunities do you see? What are friends of yours telling you from other states? And what are the challenges that you're dealing with either in your business, your career, or your communities? And we'll just do this conversation style. If you really are a nerd about policy and you want to know what's happening at the Capitol, and you want to read all of these words that I wrote down on paper, I've got a little handout that I'll give to everyone after I wrap up. It's just a long document, probably 17, 18 pages long, that shows everything the state chamber engaged on in the legislature this year, picked up some priority bills, some kind of big ticket things. So you can read through and kind of see the narrative of what business is thinking about as they engage in the political process. And then if you want to sign up for those or anything, just shoot me a note afterwards. And that's a good kind of easy way to start getting plugged in if this is something you care about and want to help out. But
let me add one more thing that Hunter alluded to. When you talk about workforce development, you talk about economic development, you talk about growing communities. What does that mean in Omaha versus what it means in Seward, right? 8,000 people. You want growth, but it's not the same kind of growth that other places want, right? So how do you balance that with strategic, surgical types of growth that bring the jobs that you want? In Utah, where I was raised, it's the equivalent of what happened to Park City over the last 30 years, which is California is my Park City, right? Which I grew up in those mountains skiing and hunting and fishing and hiking, and now it's filled with everybody who moved there from California, and the first thing they did was try and change the very environment in which they came from. So when you add those things, and to Hunter's point, Utah for the last number of years, last 3 decades, has had the highest birth rate, the lowest median age, and the largest family size. And there's a state that has struggled from a workforce development standpoint. If you're putting in more kids into the population, the median age is younger, and your family size is larger, and you cannot solve the workforce problem, who will? And so as you talk about states that are losing, and Utah, I think, currently has 5 of the fastest growing cities in the country. So how do you balance that and now twist that as we begin to continue to talk about this to what does Seward want to do? And how do you do that in a strategic, surgical way? Because as you look around this room, you're gonna have people that are in different backgrounds of life, and what means growth to you may not mean what growth is to the mayor. Or that may not mean what growth is to your neighbor, right? If you're producing cattle, maybe how you look at growth is entirely different than somebody who lives 3 blocks from the library in town.
Look, Todd, we agree on everything here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, the old adage I use with the farm bureau is you've got, you know, if you've got 12 people in the room, you have 14 opinions. And that's with ag people. I mean, that's just 12 dairymen, you've got 15 opinions, right? I mean, so how do you get to that point? So let's, you know, again, I'm very curious to see how you think, to Hunter's point, what's impacting you from a policy standpoint? What keeps you up at night as a business owner or as a member of the community here, as to how do you grow the community but don't lose what, in my opinion, as someone who's been here a short time, is the beautiful thing about Nebraska, which is we are 30 minutes from where I live in Lincoln, in a small town with 8,000 people. That is beautiful middle America, and is such an advantage to business, but it's also very, very nuanced. So
It can be very tricky.
100%.
And a lot of what we deal with from a policy standpoint, working with the council, is all the things you identified as what makes a community special. You have to keep reminding yourself of that, because at some point, if you've lived here long enough, you take it for granted. And you know, I've had people tell me from Lincoln, friends that will come to Seward, and their comment is, it's such a clean community. And that was something I never even, if you'd asked me to name the top 10 things about Seward, I'm not listing that it's clean, because to me it's just normal. It's, you know, it's what our expectations are. And so to recognize that that is something that other people value about our community is probably something we should also value, because those are the people that might move here, who might want to live here in the future. And so the growth question is always a tricky one, and because it impacts everything. It impacts your infrastructure, it impacts your schools. We actually average almost exactly 1% growth a year. And so just growing enough to say that we're not dying, but we're not growing so much that the superintendent is pounding on my front door asking about the next bond issue they're going to have to pass, because their class size is just exploding. You know, so we're working together with the school district and the county, our city council. But to answer your question, from my standpoint, is if I were to say that we had a growth target, like I'm going to be at 15,000, I don't, by the way, so don't. But if I were to say I want Seward to be at 15,000 people by the next census, people would just lose it. And as they should, because the goal isn't just get bigger. Part of what makes us special is that we're not the size of other communities, and we still have that community feeling. And that's why we have kind of a bedroom community of people who want to work in Lincoln, maybe where the higher paying job might be, but want to raise a family in Seward or Utica or Milford, someplace close by that they can commute for. So I'll stop with that, but I will say just that the growth issue is what keeps me up at night, finding that balance, because you don't want to start going the other way. It gets really expensive if your community declines to the point where you have now, if you're going to reinvest, you're not talking about a small number, you're talking about a big number. Small town north of here, Staplehurst is where my dad grew up. When he was a kid, he listed to me all the businesses they had. They had banks, they had grocery stores, they had all these different businesses. Now Now they're down to like 1 or 2. And, you know, when I was a kid, we would go to Staplehurst for fun days, or whether they're I mean, it's so different. Not just in my lifetime, you know, you've seen the community. So you don't want to just assume that everything will work out. You have to be proactive, you have to be strategic, you want to talk to your community members and people who've been here a long time and see what's important to them, but also people who just moved here, and why did you move here? And see what's important, so you don't lose that sense of what makes your community special.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about, you know, Nebraska is a terribly difficult state to govern. It's huge geographically. It has all of its population, well, half of its population, concentrated within 50 miles of another state's border. And so, of course, tax policy gets really important, because if you start taxing a service that is rendered in Omaha, suddenly people are going to be like, man, my lawyer is 7% cheaper in Council Bluffs. I think I might go over to Council Bluffs, not that far of a drive. We have 93 counties. If Nebraska was founded today, I can assure you there would not be 93 counties. We have 243, I think. 243, that's the current number. There was one that closed, I think. 243 local school districts. So in some ways, we're kind of like over subdivision from a government
Don't forget
standpoint.
NRDs and rural electric districts.
Oh, certainly not. Yeah, I was saving some money on the words there, but there's a lot more political subdivisions, and like that just presents the exact challenge that you just talked about, Josh. That it's hard for the state legislature to paint with one width of brush, because for us historically we've fought the cost of business issues, right? Mandates that the state legislature hands out that are going to raise the cost of business, let's say 4% for companies within this industry. You're a large company in Omaha that's offering that particular service, where the cost of living might be higher, but the average wages are also higher. That mandate or cost is going to hit a business in Omaha or Lincoln very, very differently than it's going to hit a small community sort of rooted company in Seward or in Ord. And so the state chamber's challenge is always managing our mini masters, as the saying goes. The businesses in Omaha and Lincoln that might be larger international companies that just have different considerations with smaller communities that need anchoring retail establishments, for example, or need anchoring employment bases in the manufacturing industry, for example, to remain vibrant. Because if one of those shops closes, that can be the death knell for a small community in Nebraska. So it's a tricky task, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. What else are people thinking about?
You know, I'd like to mention about Seward
Please.
County. I grew up in Milford, Nebraska, just 12 miles down the highway. And I got a teaching job here in Seward, and I taught here for over 30 years, and with some of your children, I'm sure. But I chose to live in Seward, and I chose to live in Nebraska because of the very things you're talking about. What strong interests for Nebraskans are among my strong interests here. Seward happens to have a very strong educational system. You know, we have the university right here. Milford has Southeast Community College, who's been in existence for a long time, producing some of the strongest agricultural positions around. We have school option in Utica, Beaver Crossing, Waco. It's just a great environment to raise your family. And I think that was very important to me. When I had the opportunity to be a part of the city council, I chose to run, and I was very fortunate to be part of it. And now I'm realizing all of the intricacies of infrastructure and how important it was to make a very quiet Highway 15 where we can hear you talk while the trucks go by. It's just very exciting to see Seward growing at the rate where everyone can kind of deal with that. Seward County is also growing, and we're excited about that too. And it'd be easy to get caught up in the problems and challenges, but unfortunately, in Seward, with a growth of population, we've been able to address those over time. I think that's very important for our county.
I think Seward are going to face that challenge of growth at what proper rate more and more into the future. I mean, the population numbers at Omaha and Lincoln are relatively flat compared to where I think folks maybe 10 years ago expected them to be, but some of the fastest growing communities are the exurbs of those two metropolitan areas. You can think Ashland, Seward, Bennington, and Gretna are now sort of, Omaha. I'm an Elkhorn boy, so I've seen that. I remember being 10 years old, driving down Highway 31, and I'm listening to the radio with my mom and my dad's up in arms about how Omaha's annexing Elkhorn, and it's fine now. They don't, streets suck, but
You're not though.
What's that?
But you're really not.
I know, it's like we are, but we aren't. I've never quite got my head around it. But back to my original point, like communities like Seward that sit on the peripheral of large population hubs are going to continue to deal with this proper balance of growth. And my estimation is you're going to have a lot more bedroom folks in the next 10 years.
And that poses its own unique problem, right? As bedroom community, one of the things that communities need is stable tax base. And residents require more services than corporations do. Corporations typically pay more tax than residents do. So how do you remain a bedroom community but still have the tax base to provide the services that everyone needs in the community? And that can be a real balancing act, real challenge.
Well, I think another thing we have a challenge with that is when, multi-generational families for years, and, even our smaller communities like Utica, Seward, surrounding communities in the county, they're very involved, they're very engaged, they're on every committee, they're donating to their, their churches, they're donating to the fundraiser for the Boy Scouts, whatever it is. And just getting families to do the hours, the volunteer hours, in those kinds of community building activities that have been donated for, 6, 10 generations, whatever it's been, there's your challenge. Because they go to work outside of a community, they come back to your community, they spend time with their kids, they go back to their jobs. Like, it's not I need to invest and build this community, or I need to pour money in, or I need to volunteer hours. They're not joining their Rotary clubs and such because they don't live here during the day. And that's not a criticism, it's just a reality.
Yeah.
And so you have a change in dynamic, and you have to pay for more of those things to happen as opposed to having them all happen organically with volunteers.
Absolutely. I call that ACP, and I speak it from the rooftops. We need more ACP in our communities, which is active citizen participation, and we're just not getting it. I don't know about Utica, but Milford needs more ACP, and I preach that loudly. I think the roadway coming our direction off of the interstate is going to be one to look at, whether it's a benefit or a hindrance, whether Mayor Agmeyer wants to grow to 15,000 or Milford wants to get to 5,000 or whatever that looks like. But I think once the roadway is completed west of Lincoln, people are going to want to start commuting here a lot quicker because it's going to be an easier travel into Lincoln, which is going to be kind of exciting, but also a problem if we don't balance it right.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a thing that has happened over the years. I mean, people have become very mobile. I mean, I can remember we went to I lived in Wallback for a lot of my life. Little tiny town, 400 people. We got out of town once a year. Today, I suppose those people get out of town every day. And that's the same thing with Utica. The same thing with Seward. We complain that people don't buy groceries at our town. Well, they're working in Lincoln, they're working in Seward, they're working wherever, they'll pick it up there and come home.
Or have it delivered.
The same thing happens with Seward. People go from Seward to Lincoln. People go from Lincoln to Omaha. People go from Omaha to Kansas City. I mean, it's I don't know, it's a mobile thing that we are all involved with, and I don't know how you beat that. Take away the highways. Take away the cars, put it back in the horse and buggy time. Then maybe we'd be back to
I could go for
a
that.
stable situation. Right now, we're not stable because we can get in a car. I go to Omaha, see my kids, my grandkids. I mean,
So spinning this a little bit onto policy, right? And the dialogue around policy. This is the reason why someone like Senator Hughes needs to understand in depth what does growth look like for my community, and how does she carry that to someone like Senator Spivey that we just met with, who's talking about economic development but lives in Omaha. And what does that mean, right? I mean, I look at Seward as I drive around the country here around the state. You know, I'm currently in an apartment in Northeast Lincoln, which is not where I hope to stay, but I needed a place for my two babies, my motorcycles, and my golf clubs. So that's where I land, right? But where do I want to be? And a 30-minute commute could be a 30-minute commute from Seward.
Synergy is.
It could also be from Northeast Lincoln, right?
Well, Milford does have a better golf.
Or now you're talking my language. But my point being, this is one of the things that I think is the beauty of Nebraska. Okay, the state I come from, towns are 50 miles apart. Okay, you don't not get gas before you leave the town. And as I drove through I-80 when I came in here, I'm like, man, there's gas every 7 miles. Right? There's Seward. I want to kind of live in Wahoo just because I want to say, where do you live? Wahoo.
There's several gas stations on your way.
But I have been through there, and I'm kind of, it's not that great. It's not that great. It's, Dave Letterman loved it, but that's great. But you know what I mean is Cynthia, who's my executive assistant, lives in Eagle. And that's like 10 miles from my place. And it is rural, wonderful, beautiful Nebraska. If that is what you want, you can have that. Whether you live there or whether you're a business owner who says, I'm looking at a new manufacturing facility. And I think I can provide a lot of benefit to a community without having a significant impact on that community. Or I can provide a tax base that helps the city address those challenges. So that's where that smart growth comes in, to be able to say, how do you do that? Now, mentioned 30 years here, Councilman. I mean, and I'm sure others around the room have watched the communities grow over 30 years. We're not talking about anything we haven't seen over the last 30 years, but as we start to talk about potential increased growth, individuals now working at home, right? The tech environment, the ability. I've got a 28-year-old son who's never worked in an office. Ever.
Because you can remote in,
Because he remotes in.
which leads you to internet.
Internet, infrastructure.
Your young minds
Right.
have the solid.
Possibly some opportunity now to live in the community and have active community participation, because you're recruiting potentially different types of people to work there. So, my point would be that we need to continue. There's a reason why we have citizen legislatures. There's a reason why we have a school teacher from Western Nebraska working with someone who works in the social service industry in Omaha. Because everybody has a different understanding of what that community needs. That's the beauty of why citizen legislatures work. And air quotes is on purpose, because none of them always work, but we work through those challenges. And
They don't get paid much though.
no, they don't. No, they do not, right? And anyone who thinks that they're getting paid what they should is probably needs to rethink that. I still think the most thankless job is city council. I was on a planning commission. That one was not. That was fairly unpopular.
Planning
as well.
commission, that's a knife fight environment.
It was pretty rough. Yeah, they finally kicked me off. Apparently, I was too good.
I don't think city council's that bad here. We all get along, so it's not.
Yeah, I think Josh and I have the biggest, hardest job. I served on city council and as mayor, and I get a lot more calls as a mayor than I ever got as a councilman.
That's because they're like, fix that pothole, will you? You know, where's your shovel? Get out there, get that done.
You get a lot of calls for a lot of things.
So one of my proposals, not really, but I jokingly will say that, is that I get $5,000 a year to be mayor before taxes.
Before taxes.
Yeah,
Sign
don't
me up.
forget to take taxes out. And my joke was always like, I think the mayor should get paid $1 for every citizen in town. So if you have like 7,600 people, the mayor should get $7,600. And then when I'm tired of listening to you, I give you your dollar back. And I can say you're no longer paying my salary.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, I no longer need to speak to you, thank you very much.
We're just spitballing here.
No better.
Just spitballing.
I can just be like, no, I'm not taking your buck back, sorry, you just gave it up. I don't want it back.
I've got kind of a philosophical question, maybe for some of the younger folks in the room. I think like some of these challenges we're talking about, there's a through line through all of them, and it's a generational one. You know, the mobility, folks aren't probably buying groceries in their local community because they may be stopping in a larger community that has restaurants that they want to visit or retail establishments that they want, right? Like that's probably a decision that skews a bit younger demographically. Remote work is proportionally done by folks under the age of 40, right? That's just a generational change. The fact that the members of the unicameral are paid $12,000 a year. I get paid to do politics now, and I make a lot more than $12,000 a year. Why would I ever want to do that when I'm, you know, engaged? I want to start a family. Exactly, unless I had a benefactor or something. If you know anyone, I'm joking. But this growth issue as well, I think, is probably a generational one. It skews likely a bit older, those who want more conservative growth and those who, you know, want to take the gloves off and build, right? And so I think there's this adage that people closer to my age are no longer joiners. They're not joining the Rotary clubs, they're not joining the Elks Club. They're not coming to city council meetings. They're not showing up to chamber coffees. Why is that, one, for anyone who has thoughts on that? And then two, how can our politics change? And that's really a challenge for politicians, I think. How can our politics change to invite the level of participation necessary so that decisions made about the future of the state aren't being disproportionately made by the folks who won't be around to enjoy the future of the state? You see what I mean? It's just like short-term versus long-term.
Get off my lawn mentality.
It's to get off, and I had to do that. I actually had that happen to me for the first time on
You
Sunday
had to
night.
tell a child to get off your lawn?
I had to tell a child to get off my roof. I was laying in bed Sunday night. I live downtown in Lincoln, and it's kind of got a low roof condo. And it's about 8:30, I'm falling asleep, and I hear footsteps, and I see a shadow past the skylight. And I'm like, oh my God, there are kids on the roof. Sure as shit, two 13-year-old kids. They were stuck, like they had no idea. I had to help them down. And I'm screaming at them, get out of here, you know, you're lucky I don't call the police. I never want to see you again. We're so sorry, sir. So I had a moment of like kind of age slapping in the face.
I love that they call you sir.
Yeah, like my dad's sir. My dad's actually trained.
I still call my dad sir, and I'm like, yeah,
call me buddy or
I'm
something.
sir now.
Yeah. So for folks in the room who've thought about this, is there a solution to that? Am I correct in thinking that there's a demographic line that can be drawn between some of these issues? What do we do about it? Maybe that's homework for the week or something. I don't know.
I think
I'm thinking about it.
I think you have two things. One is a lot of people aren't engaged because they just don't know.
Bingo.
So, like through our business, what we do is I pick people in the, in management. And I'm like, okay, you're going to go with me to this chamber luncheon.
Yeah.
Or you're going to attend on behalf of the company. I pull people like off the floor, the production floor to do it. So it's not just office people. It's like to give them that exposure and then say like, if you enjoyed this, you want to be more involved in any of these types of things, just let me know.
How badly do they hate you when you bring them back, Jessica?
Actually, most of them enjoy it. If they want to grow, like they'll say like, this was cool, cool, I've
That
never
was
done
fun.
anything like that before, but you have to
Right.
engage them when they're there.
Right.
You can't let them sit at a table at a dinner and then not talk to them,
Yeah.
or not introduce them to people. Like, it is a
It's
job
an immersion.
to bring them to those types of things. So that's one of the things. The other things in communities is you take your kids with you and make them do the things.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not, people always say, how did you get into public service? How did you get involved in your community? I didn't know any different. I like thought that was what every kid did.
You were right along.
Like, and so I didn't know that you could be on the side of a parade getting candy. I thought you had to be in the parade
Yeah.
because that's what I did my entire life. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't a question of how to get involved. It was just like when you are involved. And I recognize I'm an anomaly there,
Yeah.
but like I make my nephews go. Like I make, my birth daughter go. I make other children I borrow go. And now like they think like when they come to Seward for the 4th of July, they don't say like, where are we gonna sit for the parade? They say, who are we gonna walk in the parade with this year, Aunt Jessica?
Yeah.
They walk with Josh. But, it's,
Always look for parade walkers.
yeah, so it's like I don't want to use the word indoctrinate, but you kind of just bring them to the table and don't give them an option to be involved because you've been involved in the generations before you have been involved. And so that's how I think there's a couple ways you can do it. For people who've never had the exposure, you provide them that exposure.
You make it normal.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
your earlier point about what attracts you to a community, and I mentioned, is Seward's clean, but that's not something that occurred to me. But you make that normal for other people, and then they hold you to that expectation because that's what drew them to your community.
When I bring executives from Lincoln Prairie Poultry to small town Nebraska, because they've really only been in Fremont and Omaha, so they haven't been out a lot, but I bring them out for meetings with farmers and such. And then they meet people and people are like, well, how do you know each other? Oh, well, we served on this committee together. My grandpa and her grandpa did that, whatever. On the rides home, they always are saying, this is not normal in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
Like, this is, like, you live in like,
Live in Mayberry.
Mayberry.
Live in
And, they see it in this, I get to see it through their lens,
Yeah.
which is that this is unique and special. But if we don't keep active and try to keep it, we're not going to have it.
Yeah.
We will no longer be unique.
We're approaching the 1 p.m. I want to be respectful.
Yeah, I gotta
of
get
your
Hunter
time.
back, too.
The thing about small towns that what makes them special is that people typically are involved in their community because they have to. You need bodies
Right.
to
If
do everything.
not you, who?
And so, for example, I mentioned this weekend is check days in Wilbur, Nebraska. When I worked in the legislature, I worked for State Senator Russ Carpachek. He owns Carpachet's Market, which has the finest meats and cheeses in southeast Nebraska. But he's also, so he was a state senator. He was chair of the General Affairs Committee. He worked for the state auditor. He is a county commissioner. He was the mayor of Wilbur before all of that. And so here's one person who has worn many different hats in a smaller community. And typically, if you make the mistake of liking it, you can probably serve on whatever you want because they're always looking for people to get involved. So.
That's a call to action right there.
I tried to put a bow on it for you.
Good.
They don't pay me per word, so
Well, I've got like a write-up. This is not my life's work, but it's my year's work, so I'd love for you to read it.
pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's not, it's lawyer speak, all of it. It's just what the chamber does with the legislature. So if you want to read more of this stuff, I do one a week during the legislative session, just send me a note, I'll put you on the list. Good way to stay involved. If you want to help, if you want to, talk more about things, call us. That's what we're here for. We care about business and politics and where those two meet.
Hunter and I we're party animals. We sat at the bar the other night for about 2 hours and talked tax policy and the history of tax policy.
I've never seen him drink so fast.
I'm like, I gotta have a couple more beers before this makes sense. But
Yeah.
we're those guys you want at the party talking tax policy. But please stay in touch with us. Let us know what we can do. We love working with Jonathan and his team. Again, our focus is statewide. The message I've been trying to continue to carry is what's good for Seward is good for Nebraska, it's good for Scottsbluff, is good for a cook, right? And those might be different things. There's times when we're gonna go to Jonathan, we're gonna say, hey, we're gonna hand the ball off to you, we want you to run because there's a really good project that could be really good for Seward. And there's other times when I'm gonna lean on Jonathan and say, I need you to block for a second while we run this offense over here and we do something else for the rest of the state. It's not just about the two biggest cities in the state, it's about the whole state. And I would say that if Heath or Jason were sitting here, if there's times when I'm gonna say to Heath, I need you to get your ass in front of me and block, because what we're gonna do is gonna be really good for Kearney, or it's gonna be really good for North Platte, and that means that raises that tide. And so that's our job as the chambers to help kind of do that. And so as the new guy, I would say that's kind of what we've talked about is Big Ten football. We're gonna run a little more West Coast. We're still gonna score touchdowns, still gonna do the same thing, but it might be a little flashier.
What's wrong with the option?
Yeah, the option is indefensible if you play it correctly.
I played center, it's the same job.
The only team I ever saw that ran it really, really effectively was Air Force, and I'm not sure we have the discipline that Air Force does to get it done. So, is that a fair political answer there?
We'll run some tape from you from the
All right,
90s.
let's do it.
Pistol.
Right.
We're in the pistol now.
Get you some Tom Frazier on.
Right, let's do it, right? So, again, it's been a pleasure to be in Nebraska so far, and the one thing I would leave you with is that I think this is normal in a lot of states. The one thing that we do here that I would love to see us change a little bit more is that we tend to talk a lot about what we're not, and we need to talk about what we are. Nebraska needs to talk about what we are, and not about how we don't compare with other states, because that doesn't matter. You know, we recruit the companies that we want to come here. We help the existing companies that are here grow well. We produce incentives. We grow the economy, and we produce the secret ingredient. I actually texted my good friend Governor Spencer Cox about 3 weeks ago, who's the governor in Utah, and says the secret sauce for Utah is the people. And I said, Governor, you don't have the secret sauce. We do, so watch out. We had a little banter back and forth on that. He threatened me when I left, and I said, we're nipping at you. We got you. So anyway, thanks for what you guys do. Thanks for what you do in communities, and thanks for allowing us as a chamber to continue to work on growth in the state. Thank you.
Thank you.